All right, let's move on now to the Week 11 slate, and we start off with a good one, folks. The 6-2 Tennessee Titans go to Baltimore, who are 6-point home favorites, who are also 6-2 on the season, I believe. Hayden, the Ravens are coming off an embarrassing loss. The Titans last Thursday gave up 31 points in 3 quarters and failed to score in the entire second half. So which team and which offense do you believe in more heading into this Sunday slate of games?
I hate to do this, but this week in my fantasy blueprint column, I made Lamar Jackson the cover image, and I'm kind of believing in a little bit of the bounce back. The Titans are allowing the second most pass attempts per game. So I think that this would be a week to start Marquise Brown, to start Mark Andrews. If you're still searching for a flex spot for Marquise Brown, you can't really bank on him as like a flex option every single week. You have to really pick your spots because he's not being utilized. Lamar Jackson's still missing throws. The offensive line is now becoming more of a mess than it ever has been. So you have to temper expectations long-term. But I think this week, the Ravens are projected for 28 points. That's the 5th most on the slate. So I think that Lamar Jackson, Marquise Brown, Mark Andrews all deserve starting consideration.
Matt, how far do you have Marquise Brown down? Because I settled at wide receiver 39. I just need to make sure that is fair here.
I think I have him at literally wide receiver 39. And
okay,
it's interesting, hearing Hayden lay it out, but just like, it's week 11. How much longer can we be going based on projection and what should be happening? And we haven't seen it. And just, you'd be irresponsible to, you can make a case. So there's cases to make, but like in terms of like pure rankings, you'd be irresponsible to be like ranking him as a wide receiver 2-3 at this point.
As for that backfield, we saw Mark Ingram come back, and it was our worst fears. There was a report by Jason Lockenforest of take it however you want to. Pretty much only one way to take it.
Always starting beef on the show.
Someone's got to do it.
Beat writers. It's you and just firing shots in that direction every single.
Well, if I do my job for 17 weeks, I expect others to do their job. But Ingram came back, and the rumor was that Dobbins was going to be given the chance to emerge. And yes, he outsnapped Mark Ingram 29-17. But on touches on the day, it was actually Edwards who played the fewest snaps with 15 and led with 8 touches. Ingram with 7, Dobbins with 6. So again, just like before the Ingram injury, you really can't start any of them, honestly, until one separates from the other. I'm still betting on Dobbins as the best player among them. But as long as Ingram's involved, they will all be involved, and thus they are all pretty useless for fantasy, honestly.
Pat, let's talk about this Titans offense, because if I can rewind in my memory, there were points this season when we were so excited about Ryan Tannehill, where he had shown the ability to change this offense versus what it was in 2019 in terms of lifting them out of holes and, being able to win in multiple ways. That's almost like vanished recently. And they're going to need to do that against this Baltimore Ravens team and defense, where while it certainly was not great against the New England Patriots last week, they certainly have the potential, and have shown it, especially at cornerback, to cause opposing quarterbacks plenty of issues.
Yeah, but you hit the nail on the head there in your intro. Ryan Tannehill seemed like he was going to be one of those guys who was like breaking regression models and would just be like one of the never regressors, but it has finally caught up with him, the limited volume in fantasy and just in real life. He's completed under 20 passes in 4 straight games. The past 2 weeks, he's completed 15 passes and 10 passes. And that was after back-to-back weeks where he completed only 18 passes. So the volume is disappearing. Before, limited volume wasn't necessarily a huge deal for him because he was averaging over 9 yards per attempt, but that has come back down much more to earth this year, only 7.5, 7.6 yards per attempt. If there's a silver lining, it's that most of this lack of production has come in tough matchups, and the Steelers, the Bears, and Colts are 3 of the past 4 opponents. But yeah, the Ravens are another one. Even with the Ravens showing vulnerabilities kind of this year, it doesn't seem like this is a spot where Ryan Tannehill is going to get back to 19 completions for 270 yards and 3 touchdowns. I think we're basically seeing Ryan Tannehill kind of settle in as like he's got a legit QB2 floor, but he's just lacking the QB1 ceiling right now.
Hayden, whenever we think, at least for me, whenever we think about these two teams playing, I think back to the AFC divisional round from last year, 28-12 win for the Titans over the Ravens. And in that game, Ryan Tannehill only attempted 14 passes, completed 7 of them for 88 yards and 2 touchdowns. Meanwhile, Derrick Henry had 30 carries. Lamar Jackson, on the other side, had 59 attempts, working in negative game script the entire time, threw for over 360 yards, rushed for 140 yards in a defeat. And I think when you look at that box score, you think that the Titans just ran to win. But in reality, they had to pass first to get out in front and then just ran it up on the scoreboard and on the ground after that. Is that the formula for them to win this week as well?
Well, I think the other big component outside of the matchups recently is they lost their left tackle for the season, Taylor Lewan, one of the better tackles in the league. And they're getting basically nothing out of their right tackle. They drafted a first-round right tackle who's been on the COVID list. They don't even trust him to start games. And when he has played some, he hasn't been very effective. So right now, a play action-based offense that is missing both of their tackles, that's where you can start seeing some of these lower scores come in. And I think Vegas is adjusted. Vegas now is projecting the Titans for the 23rd most points on the week, in a week where there's only 28 teams playing. So I think that Ryan Tannehill, like Pat said, is like a low-end QB2, and you have to kind of downgrade A.J. Brown like another tier below. All these guys have plenty of upside because we've seen them just break off big plays, but you kind of have to reset your expectations. I even think for Derrick Henry, who's I think beforehand was like an elite top 5 option. I think I'm sliding him down just a little bit. Matchups playing into that. The Vegas totals playing into that. The offensive linemen are playing into that.
They're also getting Deontay Foreman and Jeremy McNichols, and now Darrington Evans returning in the next couple of games, involved behind Henry for a sprinkling of touches as well, which is bad whenever you're a touchdown-dependent player who is not being used in the passing game. Having said that, you can still depend on A.J. Brown, who, remember, before this game was shoved at least 7 targets in every appearance prior, and the box score would have been much more kind had he pulled in that pretty easy 50-yard touchdown throw from Brian Tannehill. So you have faith in A.J. Brown in this matchup, despite likely being against Marlon Humphrey.
Yeah, simplifying the entire thing, it certainly sounds like whichever team takes the lead early, if they can establish that lead and carry it with them throughout the game, then that's the style that both teams want to play. All right, let's move on. The 3-5 Carolina Panthers go to Detroit, who the Lions are 1.5-point favorites, a total of 48 in this game, 3-5 versus 3-6. Oh boy, let's get excited. Hey, Daigle, let's start with you. There are questions with both quarterback spots. Just, in case this game needed more layers of excitement onto it. Teddy Bridgewater left last week with a right knee injury. He's been day-to-day and limited in practices. Meanwhile, Matthew Stafford is not at full health either. Any update in either of those situations, and how are you handling it with the view of Sunday in mind?
It sounds like Stafford is fairly questionable. It sounds more like a Friday or game time call. And on the other side of the ball, of course, Teddy Bridgewater, unlikely it seems to play. And I will say, I wrote this in the waiver wire column, but if it's Will Grier, who we saw all we need to see last year, or PJ Walker, who, yes, was the XFL MVP, 5-0 with the Houston Roughnecks, 1,300 yards and 15 touchdowns. Having said that, that was the XFL. This is NFL competition. So if we get PJ Walker or Will Grier under center, the Lions defense becomes one of the primary streamers of the entire week. You just thrust them in there and you find a way into the fantasy playoffs with them.
I will say with PJ Walker, when it was only like a series or two, I can't remember who they were playing. It was the Thursday night game where Teddy went out for a series or two, and PJ Walker came in. It was a noticeable difference where he was forcing the ball down the field. So maybe we could get like a true YOLO ball DFS punt play game from PJ Walker if he does end up starting. But John is 100% correct that he does put the Lions defense into play as well.
Hayden, we saw a massive workload for DeAndre Swift last week, finally. 16 carries, 5 receptions last week. We've seen this Carolina defense still, outperform expectation week in, week out, at least early on. And now it's kind of stabilized as one of the bottom units in the NFL. I'm just here crossing my fingers and my toes that DeAndre Swift once again gets 20 touches this week. And I would expect him to in a great matchup where I think 1.5 points, and it's all dependent on quarterback play. But I could see the Lions winning by a field goal at least in this game.
Yeah, of course, this all depends on Matthew Stafford. He's playing with a backup quarterback. You have to downgrade all of these guys. But for DeAndre Swift, since the bye, he's had 4 out of the 5 games. He's had more than 15 expected fantasy points. And last week kind of was the biggest difference maker. Adrian Peterson played a season low 7 snaps. I think that's a sign that DeAndre Swift is going to be more or less in like a bell cow role. I think that he's now teetering up to like borderline wide or RB1 consideration. He was kind of in this like boom bust RB2 role. So DeAndre Swift looks really good. He has a 3-down profile. That's something that Adrian Peterson obviously doesn't have. So I think that if the Lions are smart, they should be really relying on DeAndre Swift the rest of the season, at least to see what they have with them, because there's a pretty big ceiling with him.
I actually have him as the RB5 overall in the entire league.
Wow,
And
love it.
I have a lot of faith, even if it is Chase Daniel, because the one way we know you attack the Panthers is on the ground. So as long as he continues receiving that type of usage, there should be literally nothing stopping him on Carolina's side on defense.
I couldn't go full Chase Edmonds RB5 with DeAndre Swift like I did with Chase Edmonds a few weeks ago, but I did go RB9. And yeah, I mean, the Panthers allow the third most running back fantasy points, and they've given up the most running back receptions. So Hayden said, if the Lions are smart, which, challenge accepted from
beware.
But yeah, I mean, it seems like a foolproof week for DeAndre Swift. Knock on wood.
Daigle, quickly, with Christian McCaffrey out again, and I understand this is all relative to quarterback play, but is Curtis Samuel once again relevant because he's going to get backfield touches with Mike Davis back there as well?
I believe so. And again, we talked about this a little bit on the waiver show I don't know. We do a lot of shows. We talk about it. We talk about it sometime.
5 a week. We do 5 shows a week, Daigle.
He continues playing over 74% of the snaps without Keith Kirkwood and Seth Roberts as the third and only pretty much receiver. And also, you're still starting Mike Davis as a running back 1 because he will get the dump offs from Chase Daniel or not Chase Daniel, from PJ Walker or Will Grier. Remember, Will Grier also loved shoving to the running back last year. Having said that, Mike Davis has been fairly bad the last 2 or 3 games, so it's somewhat concerning. But at a position where we need the players, still fringe RB1. And what else was I talking about in this game? This game is a mess. I can't even remember.
Yeah, Mike Davis has started bleeding a few touches to guys I can't even remember their names behind him.
Rodney Smith.
Yeah, but I agree. I still have him. I think I have him right at RB12.
Yeah.
Quickly, Hayden, Kenny Golladay out still?
It sounds like he might be trending in the right direction. It's still up in the
air.
Okay, good. That makes Marvin Jones obviously irrelevant. Danny Amendola obviously irrelevant. The other guy I'm watching with the Lions is TJ Hawkinson. Season low 22 routes last week. That was probably because his toe was acting up. He has like top 5 potential, and he was kind of producing like that. But if you're dealing with like a turf toe or whatever injury he has, and Kenny Galladay's coming back, that's kind of a slight concern for TJ Hawkinson. But obviously, he has a huge ceiling as well.
Let's move on. The lowly Philadelphia Eagles are going on the road to the Cleveland Browns. Cleveland, 3.5-point favorites at home, and they are 5-3. Daigle, can the Eagles stop the strength of the Browns, which is the run game? Obviously, everyone knows that when facing the Browns, and in turn, force Baker Mayfield to beat them in the air?
I genuinely have no idea. It really comes down to, even with the Eagles defense, Carson Wentz, because how often will he give the Browns a chance to drive the field? Now leads all quarterbacks in sacks taken, fumbles lost, and interceptions thrown. That's why the Browns are pretty much the top streamer the entire week. And if he continues giving the ball to them, we saw this past week that, yes, Nick Chubb played fewer snaps than Kareem Hunt, and Kareem Hunt out-touched him 23-19. But we should probably also expect Chubb's usage to rise in this game now that we are 14 days removed from his injury. So, the Eagles front 7, that is the strength of their defense. Having said that, I still think the Browns, we know what they want to do. Baker Mayfield now in 4 games with both Chubb and Hunt. 39 attempts in that first game against the Ravens as they were blown out. Otherwise, though, no more than 23 in the other 3 contests. So as long as the Browns are not forced to throw, they will not. And it's also strange because it's been 2 weeks now, 2 games for the Browns, and we haven't seen their offense at all because it's been 2 win games. We can basically throw those last 2 games on offense out the window.
Yeah, I was just the Eagles' run defense. Like, no one would think of the Eagles as like a bad run defense this year because they're really not. But the game script is always so favorable to run on them. The Eagles never get leads, and they never get 2-score leads. And they're actually allowing the 7th most rushing yardage in the NFL right now. And the Brown, anything can happen, I feel like, against the Browns, but I don't think we think the Eagles are going to get out to some lead and hold a lead against the Browns. So the Browns are going to be able to do what they want to do with the running game. And that's such a great point. I mean, they've had back-to-back hurricanes off Lake Erie somehow for the Browns. And we basically haven't seen at all what the Browns' post-Odell Beckham offense is going to look like, especially since Austin Hooper had the appendectomy. So hopefully we finally get a real window into how Jarvis Landry and Austin Hooper are going to be used down the stretch.
I will say the peripherals for those two players were good despite the production lacking. Austin Hooper ran a team high 20 of 24 routes last week. Jarvis Landry had 25% target share, was out there for basically all of the routes as well. So I think both of those guys, you just kind of have to ignore last week's production. As long as this week there's not another wind game coming. I haven't checked the weather reports. It's only Thursday. But I think Jarvis Landry is at least a flex play. I think Austin Hooper in this tight end wasteland is definitely somebody to go back to the well as like a low end tight end one.
Daigle, tell me if you already covered this because I might have been tuning everyone out there for a second. But have we talked about Travis Fulgham? Have we talked about Miles Sanders? Have we talked about Jalen Reagor? Because Miles Sanders was just incredibly unlucky last week with both other running backs scoring touchdowns, despite him, I think, playing well and obviously getting a good workload. Meanwhile, Travis Fulgham has kind of disappeared as the team's X receiver and go-to receiver. And in some ways, and Evan Silva pointed this out on the Establish the Run show, where it seemed like Doug Peterson coming out of the bye week wanted to make Carson Wentz a little bit less hero ballish, where he was scoring all of his fantasy points earlier this season because of that hero ball, because he was, getting out to the edge and his rushing stats. I mean, he was among the tops in the league at that. And so if Doug Peterson is trying to make him more of a conservative pocket passer, one, I don't know how much success that's going to mean for these wide receivers, Daigle, and two, it's probably not going to mean a good fantasy day for Carson Wentz either.
Also on the ETR show, Silva talked about Chicago radio, and I can attest that is true. They actually do blame the play calling on the Bears' issues and not the fact they have zero playmakers outside of Robinson. Anyhow, for the Eagles passing game, yes, that is true. It comes down to Wentz, and the fact is he has been poor. He is living his fantasy production, whatever he can achieve, pretty much on the ground, more or less, single-handedly. But what we saw before the bye was Reagor play fewer snaps and run fewer routes than Greg Ward. And we thought, okay, probably because he's fresh off injury reserve, we'll probably get back into it the next game. And that's exactly what we saw here, where Reagor not only led Ward in routes run, but also Travis Fulgham. And now these past two games, Reagor has a 20% target share to Fulgham's 18%. So we've seen Fulgham's like 25% target share that was consistently happening the past month fall with Reagor in the mix. The issue also is not an issue for fantasy because we can still rely on Dallas Goedert. And I understand it's been somewhat frustrating just because he hadn't scored touchdowns. But remember, he left for a few series this past game, and he still played 94% of the snaps. The guy is literally an every down player as long as he's healthy for an entire game. So you have to keep going back to him legitimately as a top 6, top 7 option.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were throwing the ball to like Richard Rodgers a bunch. I mean, he was like top 5 in like air yards over the last month. So eventually you're going to see this flip back. So I think that Dallas Goedert, just like Austin Hooper, kind of trust the process. I mean, who are you starting over these guys anyways? These are both like low end tight end ones with a top 5 tight end 1 ceiling.
Taysom Hill? We'll get there in a little bit. We'll get there. All right. Let's now go. And by the way, I realized that all the records I've been reading out have been from a place that has not updated them. I will not tell you where that place is, but I will not be mentioning records as we move forward from here on out.
I didn't think the Ravens were 14-2, but I just
only in my dreams, Pat. All right, let's now go to the New England Patriots, again, who are 2-point favorites on the road against the Houston Texans, a total of 48.5 in this game. Pat, because of that jab, I'll turn to you. I question this Patriots offense each and every week, it seems like, because they are so one-dimensional and not in a good way because it's in the running game. But how even I cannot question it heading into this game when they're going to face off against the last-ranked rushing defense in the NFL and the Houston Texans.
Yeah, am I going to get showered with praise, by the way, for essentially picking the Patriots last week over the Ravens? I'm just right. I'm always right. I am a genius. Yeah, I mean, we saw what we wanted to see. So we saw basically, a wide range of outcomes. It seems like any given week with the Patriots right now. And we saw like the outer limits of like good possible outcomes last week. I mean, that was as good of a game as the Patriots could have possibly hoped for against an opponent like the Ravens. Now they have a much more forgiving, softer matchup. A Texans run defense, allowing 10 more rushing yards per game than any other team, 167. And maybe the Texans have such an explosive offense that they can flip that script if they could get out to a big early lead, but it just doesn't seem likely to happen. That's not how things have been going for the Texans all year. And it just, even with the Patriots' defensive limitations, it just doesn't seem like something that anyone can really do to the Patriots right now to me. And I think this will be the kind of game flow where the Patriots, who want to be run-based, obviously, can really impose their will, can let Damian Harris try to really take that role and run with it more, get Cam Newton's power running established early, and it just sets up this week, not like a unique analysis, but this week sets up well for the Patriots to do what they want to do.
The DK count can attest that I got a lot wrong in betting in week 10. But one thing we got right for fantasy was Cam Newton, who now over his past 5 games, QB 11, QB 36 in the one game against the Niners where it got completely out of hand and he was benched. And then the QB 11, QB 8, and QB 11 the past 5 games. So still a strong QB 1. And now finally he gets a juicy, salivating matchup. And best of all, outside of the standalone production, we know where he's going to go. The last 3 games, only one guy has a 40% target share in every single one of those games, and it's none other than the best receiver on their team, Jacoby Myers. There's nowhere else to look. Hayden, unless, not to put you on the spot, unless the fantasy blueprint has sifted through these running backs in some way, I still think Rex Burkhead has the most value, if only because he's being used more in the passing game than James White. But Damian Harris has admittedly looked amazing. I just wish they'd throw him any amount of targets whatsoever.
Yeah, with fantasy usage, Damian Harris and Rex Burkhead are both like competing 1-1, and James White's basically nowhere to be found. I think Damian Harris, I would be ranking ahead of Rex Burkhead. He had 22 touches, all of them are on early downs. But like we said, Houston's allowing the most carries per game, in addition to being last in rushing EPA defense. So I think Damian Harris probably projects for somewhere around 20 touches. The question always becomes, is he going to get the goal line carries? Because obviously he's competing with Cam Newton. But I think just for real quick to get into DFS, and we'll talk about this on Friday, Daigle, awesome spot for Cam Newton because you're missing Patrick Mahomes, Russell Wilson, and Kyler Murray from the main slate. I think that you can get away with Cam Newton to Jacoby Myers. Hopefully Cam runs for a touchdown or 2, throws a touchdown to Jacoby Myers, who's been balling out. He's seeing like wide receiver 2 usage. I think that he's here to stay as every week, wide receiver 3 at least.
Never has the QB 11 in a fantasy week received so much praise on the show.
Hey, listen, his floor has been, they're buttressing his floor too. He's finally got at least one consistent passing game weapon. And Rex Burkhead, he's basically like the turbocharged James White now. It's like the James White role actually with carries.
For season long, I will also say that we usually try to find the Ezekiel Elliott line on this show. Like, where do we draw the line? I got to Rex Burkhead this week, and I was like, oh, that's the toss-up. Not sure which one I'm starting, but that's
well, we need to talk about the running backs on the other side. It seems like David Johnson is again going to be out. So Duke Johnson
reserve.
Okay,
so 2 more games.
So Duke Johnson is once again going to be the lead ball carrier. Hayden, when you went back and either watched the highlights or the full game, what did you think of Duke Johnson, that performance? Because obviously it was in a lot of wind, at least it seemed like that in Cleveland. The Houston Texans team just could not create any offensive momentum or rhythm at all, but at least Duke Johnson owned that backfield completely.
Yeah, I'm kind of debating, do we throw that game completely out the window or do we try to look into this? I'm kind of leaning to just throw it out the window. And Duke Johnson played 54, 57 snaps. So how low are you going to rank him, even if you don't trust him behind this offensive line and just like this offense in general? I mean, the Texans are dead last in rushing efficiency despite sending a second-round pick for a running back this offseason. Yeah, I mean, what are you going to do? Duke Johnson is he's probably like a mid-range RB2. He's got a little bit of a ceiling if the Texans offense could figure things out, but for right now, you can't really trust it too much.
The Texans have run the ball 30 times since David Johnson left the game, and Duke has every single carry in that span. The issue the past 3 weeks, not an issue for Deshaun, but issue for Duke, is that also we've seen a little bit of rushing juice from Watson the past 3 games, at least 7 carries, including 10 in that little span in every single contest. So it is also a Watson ceiling game here.
Go ahead, Pat. Sorry.
I was
just setting something up, by the way. He's spoiling on something.
The thing with Duke Johnson, he hasn't been Chase Edmondsing, where in his limited work, he wasn't popping big plays. He hasn't been popping big plays as a role player this year. And yeah, they were completely absent as the bell cow last week. And I just wouldn't be shocked if he's been ineffective as a runner all year. It's been very sad for the Duke Johnson fan brigade, which I've long been a part of, but I just don't know. I think this could be a week where the Buddy Howells of the world start to get more involved if he just shows no juice earlier in the game. And it was an interesting point John made about Deshaun running last week. It's been several weeks, but last week I think it was probably mostly because of the wind. Because even on 4th and 3s, 4th and 4s, it seemed like they didn't have faith that the pass wouldn't get batted down, and they were calling designed runs. But yeah, Duke Johnson is on the spot because he was not even popping as a role player.
We've mentioned that the Patriots want to run the ball. We've mentioned that neither of these teams have a high win total. The total in this game is 48.5. Dago, I'm kind of liking what you're saying, where this could be a Deshaun Watson ceiling game against a very bad Patriots defense. We know how bad the Texans defense as well, and the Patriots strengths match up very well against the weaknesses there. Could we get the over here despite possibly a slow script from the Patriots and wanting to slow the game down?
You already read why I redeposited in my DK account this week, was because the over, among others, in this game. And it's both sides, as you said, strength versus weakness for both sides. And more importantly, the Patriots have looked their best whenever they've been able to do what they want to do. And we know what they want to do. They want to run the ball with Cam and Damian Harris. Also sneaky for this game, Sonny Michel has to be activated on Sunday or he's out for the year. His 21-day window is up. So that's something you're watching for the prospects of having Damian Harris in the fantasy playoffs.
All right, let's move on to the Pittsburgh Steelers and Jacksonville Jaguars. Oh, yes. Sunday keeps getting better and better. The Steelers are 10-point favorites on the road, a total of 46.5 in this game. Hayden, everyone hit last week for the Pittsburgh Steelers at wide receiver. Finally, we got one of those weeks. Claypool, Deontay, Juju, but James Conner did not hit, and it feels like he hasn't hit for quite some time. Is it time to look away this week, even in a spot where, again, they are 10-point favorites on the road?
It depends what your definition of looking away is. As an RB1, yes. As an RB2, certainly not. He has to be a top 15 play for me, at least. We've seen him still kind of in this like bell cow role. He's just not getting the touches with that bell cow role. He's not losing many snaps. We just seen the Steelers offense go from like middle of the pack in neutral pass rate to like top 5 in neutral pass rate over the last basically since the bye week. So I think Ben Roethlisberger is like a QB1 play this week for sure, because the Steelers are projected for the 3rd most points in the week. I think James Conner, you can only drop him so far because, I mean, the Jaguars are 28th against running backs, and we can still project James Conner for most of the snaps in the backfield, even though he's doing nothing with them.
To be fair, last week was the only time he has eclipsed 80% of the snaps all year long. So he actually played a season high in snaps. The issue is he only had 13 carries and 15 and 18 backfield touches as they healthy scratched Anthony McFarland. So while he is a bell cow now usage-wise, they're just not giving their running backs many touches these past 2 games because they're building and then sustaining with the passing game. These past 2 weeks, the 3rd highest pass play rate with a lead and the 6th highest pass play rate and neutral game script. And with the lead, that's been 62 plays the past 2 games. So it's not a small sample whatsoever. So if it's a changing of the guard, all of these receivers we dumbfoundedly try to sort out every single week. It doesn't even matter in the end because all of them can sustain fantasy production standalone.
It's just a very tough situation with James Conner because, I mean, are they doing that maybe because they no longer trust James Conner? Is maybe the reason the neutral pass rate has really increased, because it's been 3 straight weeks he hasn't even reached 50 yards rushing, and 2 of those games were the Cowboys and the Bengals. It's like, if you can't do it then, when are you going to do it? And this is yet another, such a great match, 10-point favorites. Just totally insane. But I mean, I could see the Steelers, they're just going full Chiefs. Why run when you have these 3 receivers getting all 3 of these guys 10 targets last week? Just totally insane. And that's definitely in play against the Jaguars, one of the absolute worst pass defenses. They allow almost 9 yards per attempt. And I just don't, it is true though, because James Conner was someone, when I did the ranks, I was thinking like James Conner is someone I'm going to get lower this week. Like, I'm going to have James Conner like the RB 18 or 19. Like as Hayden said, it's just not really possible. I still have him like right on the RB 1-2 borderline because the snaps are there, the touches are there. We got to see the production though. We have to see the production this week. Otherwise, you can't make the usage argument anymore.
Hayden, Pat mentioned the Cowboys. There's this narrative that Mike Tomlin and the Steelers team plays down to their opponents. I think if you probably looked at the spreads in the past, there's probably some truth to that as well. Again, 10-point favorites here against Jacksonville. If Jacksonville was going to keep this game close, which they did last week against Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers, who is it going to go through? Is it going to go from Jake Luton to DJ Chark? Is it going to be somehow James Robinson continuing this incredible undrafted rookie year?
I mean, that's it. That's all they have. I mean, It's just those 2. I think you can start James Robinson as a RB1 every single week. Even that the Jaguars are projected for the fewest points of the week, only at 18 points. But you still can project James Robinson for almost a touchdown there just because he's getting all of the work. And I believe, is Chris Thompson injured again? I think they were considering
he went on injured reserve. He went on injured reserve, yeah.
So, I mean, there you go. There's the passing down role as well. So, yeah, I think the only person that you're kind of considering for the Jaguars is, do you start DJ Chark? His inconsistent usage, I get it. The matchup is not ideal, but it's not something to shy away from either, where you project for a lot of pass attempts. So, I think DJ Chark's like a boom bust wide receiver 3 player right now.
I talked about this in the recap show, but with Luton, it just seems like, I know it's early, but it's already time has run out. Cap the opening drive against the Texans, who missed Bradley Roby that game, by the way, with a 73-yard touchdown to DJ Chark. In that span, 73 pass attempts, 5.5 yards per attempt. And that this past week against the Packers, they didn't have Kevin King or Jair Alexander. So
right.
Clock's out.
Yeah, I kind of think DJ Chark's day is dependent on hitting that deep shot or not. Like it hit a couple weeks ago in Luton's first start very early on in that game. Last week, they had one wide open and Luton just underthrew it. And so, I think he might get, as Hayden pointed out, 8 targets no matter what, because Jay Gruden has started scripting these shorter routes to him. But in order for him to hit like wide receiver 2 status or absolutely wide receiver 1 status, he's going to have to hit on one of those 50-plus yard touchdowns, which is possible because the Steelers have been one of the worst in the league at defending 15-plus yard throws, and that was from week 1 all the way up until now.
And Keelan Cole replaced LaVisca, but also the box score was friendlier because we cannot depend on a 90-plus yard punt return, I think it was, every single week. So we don't have to go to Keelan Cole.
I could also see the Steelers' defensive front just annihilating the Jaguars' offensive line and Jake Luton as well. Okay, moving on. Pat, to a game with some entertainment value. The Atlanta Falcons on the road against the New Orleans Saints, a total of 50.5. The Saints are 5-point favorites here. Pat, what will the shift be on the Saints offense, diverting from Drew Brees and instead going with the Jameis to Taysom Hill dynamic? Put on your fortune teller hat, be Miss Cleo for us for a moment. I'm trying to get references that Hayden has no idea what these are.
No idea.
And tell us how the usage of Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill is going to work. And again, the trickle down of that usage.
Well, my early gut feel is that Taysom's usage will just remain the exact same, that is his role. And there's a reason he never deviates from it, that he didn't deviate from it last year when Drew Brees was hurt. And I think it's going to be the same this year. Jameis Winston will just operate as their Drew Brees, and it's not going to be like some college thing where they're like alternating series or alternating plays. But I mean, Jameis Winston, like this is like the fantasy question of the week, the DFS question for sure, even the redraft question. I mean, how rare is it at this stage of the fantasy season where you get a plug and play QB1 quarterback? Because I still feel like that's what he is, but it's tough because we know we're not going to get Bucks Jameis Winston. I mean, the Saints offense is so hyper efficient. That is what they're built off of. Like that is who they want to be, and that's not who Jameis Winston is. So we're going to see the game called differently than it was ever called for Jameis Winston in Tampa Bay. But I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, you are who you are. Like he is Jameis Winston. There's almost no way we're not going to get some YOLO ball, and especially against this Falcons, one of the worst pass defenses, one of the worst defenses in the NFL, and Jameis Winston to me is he's like the most fascinating rank of the week. I had him as high as QB5. I currently have him QB9. I could see some people ranking him QB2 because of the Taysom Hill factor. But I think I'm going to end up riding or dying with Jameis this week and just betting on a real deal Jameis YOLO ball against the defense that he has a lot of familiarity with too.
The entire picture under center is fascinating because how often will Taysom Hill be used? Didn't play more than 8 snaps in any game last year with Teddy Bridgewater. But then again, just in April, they gave him $16 million guaranteed, a 2-year, $21 million deal. And then Jameis Winston, they have to trust less than Teddy Bridgewater, right? Like Jameis Winston, remember, just behind Matthew Stafford in air yards per attempt, 10.5 last year as a downfield thrower, whereas Bridgewater and Breeze were 32nd and 31st in average depth of target because they didn't throw downfield. They threw at the line of scrimmage. So just completely different for everyone all involved. Even Michael Thomas, who's pretty much been dependent on slants from Drew Brees his entire career, now gets a guy who's going to chuck it downfield to him fresh off a game that I know didn't look good. 7 targets, 2 catches for 27 yards, but that was a 30% target share on the week, his season high in 3 games. So I think you do have faith in all these guys, honestly.
Yeah, I think the one thing with the Falcons defense is you can look at pass funnels or run funnels kind of in 2 ways, based off of efficiency or based off of volume. The Falcons are checking both of those boxes, 29th in EPA pass defense, 2nd in rushing EPA defense for whatever reason. I think that's Grady Jarrett just dominating in the trenches. And then you can kind of see that reflected in the volume as well. So I think you're going to get plenty of volume from Michael Thomas. I mean, basically for everybody that you want to start all of them. And I think you can maybe downgrade Alvin Kamara a little bit, but he's downgrade him to what, RB1 overall still? Like I'm talking about for
smash.
Yeah, well, I'm talking about for DFS purposes.
Yeah.
I would be a little more concerned with that overall. But yeah, I think Michael Thomas is definitely a rebound guy.
Thursday podcast, just to be clear, Kamara hasn't practiced Wednesday or Thursday. Just want to make sure everyone's aware. Remember, Latavius Murray, literally a league winner last year without Kamara. So if he's still out there in waiver wires, just in case, make sure you stash him.
Yeah, Latavius Murray had weeks as the running back 2 and the running back 3 overall last season. And Jameis Winston had quarterback 5 fantasy points per game scoring last year. Pat, I kind of want a little bit of anarchy, though. Like, I want Jameis to just, like, start a mutiny there on the field if, Sean Payton wants him to be timid Teddy out there. You know how timid Teddy was last season in terms of just short passes and then hoping things work out. Just want Jameis to unleash it just a little bit, but we'll see. I mean, I don't expect him to, but –
yeah, that's going to be the game plan to start the game. But I just don't know how long you can keep Jameis Winston under wraps, like as the flow of the game gets going. Against the defense, allowing far and away the most quarterback fantasy point. I just think anarchy is the only possible outcome.
And we talk about it for this week. To be clear, the next 3 games that Breeze is expected to miss, the Saints play the Falcons, the Broncos, and the Falcons again. So that's why Jameis was the number 1 quarterback pickup for me in the waiver wire. It's not this week. You're picking up pretty much a guy you're bringing to the fantasy playoffs if he sustains under center.
And weird.
Can you guys ever remember that happening? A plug and play QB1? Like, it's just not something that happens.
Tyler Thigpen was the last one I really remember. If we can outdate ourselves here.
Not this late, but obviously Justin Herbert this year. Anyways,
oh, that's true. Yeah.
Saints and
That's
Falcons.
Like week 3 or 4. That's
I know. Saints and Falcons always is a crazy matchup. We need to. I know, like the Falcons, it's obvious. It's Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, and it's Todd Gurley doing his thing. But Hayden, we've also gotten some news on Calvin Ridley. He has missed some time with the foot injury. He got in, I think, a limited session on Wednesday, another limited session on Thursday. Who knows if he's going to play? But let's say he does. You still have to start him, don't you?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Like his splits with Julio Jones this year, it's a little bit like you have to kind of downgrade him to like the RB or wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 territory. He's now no longer a top 5 guy, but Calvin Ridley plays, you're playing.
All right.
We've seen the past 2 weeks, the Saints defense, what we assume turned the light on, right? Corral, I was looking for a good synonym, corral Brady again, and then came back against an injured 49ers team. But that's why I'm still somewhat skeptical and really like the Falcons offense here. Indoors, the first division game for these 2 teams this year. And then again, still question marks about this Saints defense, who before then, remember, I would come every week and talk about them. I misphrased that incorrectly. 10+ yard plays every single game. So yeah, I like Ridley. I like Julio. I like Ryan this week.
Let's move on. Cincinnati Bengals, Washington football team, Washington at home, 1.5 point favorites, a total of 46.5 in this contest. Pat, Joe Burrow is averaging the most attempts per game in the NFL, at least last time I checked. I know that you, because we talked about it in a video this week, have T. Higgins as a fringe wide receiver 1/wide receiver 2. That's, again, as road dogs here, not by much, but it is, which is a little shocking to people. We'll get into that a little bit later. Tell me why you're so into T. Higgins this week, Pat.
Well, first off, it's just the usage. He's the wide receiver 9 by average points and half PPR over the past 5 weeks. He's reached 6 catches in 3 of those 4 games he's appeared in during the time span. The 4th game, he had 5 catches. He's had 8 targets, 3 of those 4 games, and he's had 2 100-yard games in that span. So he's just checking all the boxes of usage and production and consistency. And Washington is a tough matchup against the pass, especially the raw passing numbers. Washington's like an elite pass defense, not quite as much on like a per play basis, but we're seeing everything we want to see from Higgins. And we saw it last week, in a tough matchup against the Pittsburgh Steelers, where as AJ Green kind of is fading to black in fantasy, and Auden Tate isn't really like emerging as like a 1-for-1 replacement. It seems like there's more and more is going on to T. Higgins' plate, and he's basically rising to the occasion. And the usage is so good that I feel like there's just we were kind of overdue for like a rankings adjustment for T. Higgins' weekly floor.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the only slight concern in the matchup is Washington's allowing the second fewest pass attempts. And I think that's partially because teams are scared to drop back because they're just dominating in pressure rates and sack rates and those types of things. But, I mean, with Joe Mixon out, most likely out, he still hasn't practiced yet. I think we're still going to see plenty of dropbacks for Joe Burrow, which is good for Tyler Boyd, good for T. Higgins. I think it's also good for Washington's defense if they're somehow available off of waivers.
To be clear, I think there is a very easy route to Washington winning this game. Having said that, I am still picking the Bengals as the upset of the week, and the line has actually moved in Washington's favor. I just prefer the offense here, although I will say game script sets up well for Antonio Gibson, who's now the RB12 in the entire year, an RB1. If you listen to preseason podcast with us, we were drafting him in the 5th, 6th round. Washington, of course, has accumulated the 5th most sacks this season, and Burrow is 35th in completion rate under pressure. This past week against the Steelers, even 14 dropbacks under pressure, didn't complete a single pass. So that's how Washington could easily win this game, although I'm still picking the Bengals.
Does Joe Burrow ever play a defensive line that's not like the 2000? Like, it's seriously like every single week. It's totally insane.
We were drafting Antonio Gibson like round 8, 9, 10 back in May, Daigle. Those were good times. Those are really good times. All right, let's move on to the four. Oh, you need more?
Talk about Alex Smith. I mean, the number 1 compiling passer in the NFL now, Alex Smith. I mean,
go ahead, Daigle.
70 weekly attempts.
I wasn't even going to talk about Alex Smith. I was going to say J.D. McKissic is clearly for real. We now have 3 appearances with Alex Smith, and in those appearances, week 6, 28.5% target share for McKissic, week 9, 36% target share, and last week, 27%, including 51% in the first half alone. So McKissic is here to stay if you need a PPR RB2. Hell, maybe he's in an RB1 this year.
Yeah, I mean, he was legitimately lining up at wide receiver because he and Gibson were on the field in the first and second quarter at the same time. And it wasn't, a split backfield. It was McKissic in the slot and being in motion, and they're getting in the football as a legitimate wide receiver. So he had some, DJ Moore / Curtis Samuel-like usage if we're going to open up the history books for Scott Turner last week, which is very, very intriguing. And, I mean, that first half for Antonio Gibson was not looking good last week until they changed the scoreboard. So if you think it's a close game and it's a good Antonio Gibson week, that's the formula we have. Now can we move on? Yes?
Correct.
All right.
Approved.
4:00 window. The Miami Dolphins go to the Denver Broncos, 3.5-point favorites, 45.5 total. Hayden, you need to explain to me why this game is only 3.5 points. Why is the spread only 3.5 points? What does Vegas know that I don't, other than wanting to incite action possibly? Or do they just think that this Denver defense is going to give Tua problems? Because I'm looking at this Miami defense, and it's a unit that I believe in to the utmost degree right now. They have overwhelmed Jared Goff in recent weeks. They've confused Justin Herbert on every single throw to the point of forcing that team to run on early downs in order to not make a mistake. And now they get Drew Lock, who is the worst of the 3, and he's also hobbled. I mean, again, 3.5 makes absolutely no sense to me.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'd say the only thing, if I'm looking at through Vegas's lens, is maybe they're like, okay, some of the ways that they're scoring touchdowns, special teams defense isn't totally sustainable. But I think good coaching does play into that. And I think that Brian Flores versus Drew Lock is a mismatch waiting to happen. If they do that amoeba defense that was scaring Justin Herbert, I can only imagine what Drew Lock's going to be thinking back there, especially if he's playing through a shoulder injury. So I think the Dolphins certainly like a top 5 fantasy defense. And I think offensively, I think that you have to be pleasantly surprised with Tua Tagovailoa. He's so accurate. I'm not sure if he's like got the greatest arm strength, if he's the greatest athlete. I think he's at least average in both of those things, but his accuracy is just so pinpoint. I think that Devontae Parker could easily start really coming on like we saw last year. You're not going to get the total YOLO balls that you were getting from Ryan Fitzpatrick, but I think that Devontae Parker's floor is certainly raised with Preston Williams being out.
That's the thing about Tua is that Miami's schedule is easy for the fantasy playoffs. I wrote that, making him a terrific season-long pickup. However, we haven't seen the ceiling from him just yet, and I don't know if we have a ceiling, if only for the bodies around him. We saw now Preston Williams without him last week, and it was Jakeem Grant, as we expected, stepping in. But even then, just 5 targets, right? 4 catches, and Devontae Parker led with a 29% target share in that game. So if you're dependent on Parker, pretty much that's it, because they don't use their running backs in the passing game. And it is only Grant and Gesicki, where who the hell knows where he goes every single week. It's just kind of hard to depend on that type of player.
Yeah, I think John hit it. Why? Because it is a very strange line. It's probably just uncertainty over the Dolphins supporting cast, because it's a very, very limited supporting cast. And I mean, that it is seems like a crazy line to me.
It does. I mean, it seems insane, but
I mean,
you know
they
what
played
that
so
means.
well. They got Justin Herbert to shave his head. Like, I don't know what the heck Drew Lock is going to do.
It might be, we keep saying Drew Lock. It might be Brett Rippon, too, who I know Rap Sheet said, oh, he had a pretty good game. He did not have a good game, by the way. He threw 3 picks against the Jets. That's not a good game.
Again, Daigle sending strays over to these national writers.
Sorry.
I mean,
Sorry.
geez, man. Anyway, Salvon Ahmed is, to me, looking good. I know we talked about it a lot in the waiver show. Hopefully everyone tuned into there. And I know Matt Breida is returning this week, but I think we can still roll out Salvon Ahmed in our lineups. What about on Denver's side? We've seen Jerry Jeudy from at least an individual skills, talent perspective, Pat, look like, again, this is a very good rookie wide receiver group. Brandon Ayuk is really emerging, Justin Jefferson, Chase Claypool, so on and so forth. But Jerry Jeudy certainly has his moments, despite obviously having a few drops along the way as well. Where do you have him ranked this week?
So I went really aggressive with Jerry Jeudy last week. I did like wide receiver 15 or 16, and then I just had to go to full retreat mode this week, wide receiver 32, 33. And, you know, it's not just, you know, like how good the Dolphins defense is, but I mean, it's how elite the cornerbacks are, how great the secondary is, and just how tough life is going to be for either quarterback. And it's such a shame because Jerry Jeudy has been popping on film and definitely been popping in the box scores, popping with the usage, even with KJ Hamler getting surprisingly high number of targets each week. But yeah, I kind of like, I went really aggressive last week, like maybe like too bold and like overreaction. And I'm kind of overreacting the other way with this week and getting Jerry Jeudy just back down like fringe wide receiver 3, just purely because of the matchup, not because of the player.
Okay.
We saw a usage change with Jerry Jeudy. He was playing in the slot for the kind of in the middle section of the year when KJ Hamler was out. Over the last 3 weeks, KJ Hamler is now the slot guy. Jerry Jeudy goes to the outside. What that means for him is more boom bust production because he's getting a lot more deep targets. His ADOT is up over these last 3 weeks. His air yards are way up. At one point, he was leading the league in air yards. I think that was in week 8. So I think that his production is definitely going to be more boom bust, especially with the quarterback play. But you see the talent. I think that he at least should be a wide receiver 3 based off of talent, based off of like downfield usage. Of course, the matchup isn't ideal, but I mean, for whatever reason, I can't figure this out. Dolphins are 3rd in passing EPA on defense, but are 20th against fantasy wide receivers on the season. So maybe it's just a volume thing, but I don't think that we need to completely avoid the matchup for whatever reason.
It's week 11, and I'm losing track of how to even work a FaceTime camera over here. Yeah, I don't know what happened. Anyways, what I was quickly going to say also is that Melvin Gordon, Phillip Lindsay, unfortunately, Lindsay continues being the better player, but they are not allowing him to separate no matter how well he performs. Melvin Gordon's 18 touches to Lindsay's 12 the past 2 games, and that's the way it's going to stay because that's how this coaching staff runs their offense.
Melvin Gordon, though, nice guy. Daigle, we met him at the Super Bowl.
Oh, terrific guy. Terrible football player, but terrific guy. Amazing individual.
What is with you today?
I'm sorry.
Pat, by the way, is the Drew Lock jersey going in the closet this week and not coming out?
Hey, if the Drew Lock Mizzou jersey, that banner will fly forever.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, he's a nice young man, Josh. I will not take any more of this slander. He's a winner.
The reason I keep bringing it up each week, Pat, is because I know you hate it so much. So there we go. All right.
Hey, at least I'm not a Panthers fan.
Up the villa. All right. Let's go now to the Jets and the Chargers. Chargers, 8.5-point favorites at home, 46.5 total. Daigle, can the Chargers, with a far more talented roster, cover the 8.5 points? It seemed pretty simple against the Jets, but we know it's the Chargers.
You would hope so, since the Jets are still bottom 4 in yards per attempt allowed to opposing quarterbacks. The issue, of course, is Anthony Lynn and this offense as they continue running on early downs. I don't think that was that bad of an approach last week, since that's how you attack the Dolphins. But if you think you're going to attack and win the Jets like that, you are incorrect because you need to attack them through the air. So it really just depends on what we get from Anthony Lynn and not what we get from Herbert, because we know what we're going to get from Herbert. We know where he's going to go, to Keenan Allen and to Hunter Henry to a lesser extent. Also, quickly about this backfield, because this is where a RB1 potentially, I have him as the RB13 overall this week, has emerged. It's not a committee whatsoever. Troymaine Pope came back and only played on special teams as a full-time player. 0 offensive snaps last week as Kalen Ballage, 46 snaps to Josh Kelly, 17. Ballage's 23 touches were the second most for any running back all year long for the Chargers. And he has now his 40 touches the past 2 games, the 4th most behind only Derrick Henry, James Robinson, and Dalvin Cook in that span. He is a tried and true RB1 and a
Tried and true
matchup.
You know what that phrase means?
In a terrific, tried and true the past 14 days, in a terrific matchup for the Chargers.
The world has only existed for 2 weeks, and that in those 2 weeks, Kalen
Ballage is the best running back you've seen the last 2 weeks.
Revenge game, Adam Gase revenge game for Kalen Ballage. If we want to add these narratives to the pack, Pat, just for cross-check reference here, where do you have Kalen Ballage this week?
Let Kalen Ballage cook, man. I have him as the RB18, which he got promoted from the practice squad 2 weeks ago and has received 20 touches in each of his 2 games since. So, they see something in Kalen Ballage. Maybe they just see that every other guy is hurt and out of rhythm right now. But the usage is impossible to quibble with. We still don't know about the talent. It is a very good matchup, of course, but the Jets on defense, they spent the week either IRing cornerbacks or releasing cornerbacks. They cut Pierre Desir. They put slot cornerback Brian Poole on injured reserve. Justin Herbert had literally not had a bad game until last week, and that included in really tough matchups with the Chiefs and Bucks. Justin Herbert should bounce back with a vengeance. But I do totally agree with John. It wouldn't go RB1, but the usage is clear-cut RB2 for Kalen Ballage.
It's tried and true.
I am expecting a humongous bounce back ever for Justin Herbert.
Yeah, I think the eye test has still failed Kalen Ballage, but who cares at this point? Hayden, anything on the Jets? Anything?
The coaching mismatch is not that big in this game. That's all I'll say. Anthony Lynn, I literally cannot believe this. The 3 weeks before, the last 2, Justin Herbert and the Chargers were top 5 in neutral pass rate. You saw a big difference. He was dominating the Bucs on the road, throwing to guys like Jalen Guyton that we don't even know where they went to college. And then you scale back because you're playing the Dolphins. Come give me a break. The Dolphins aren't the 85 Bears by any means. I get that they're a decent defense, but I don't know how you can look at what the Dolphins were doing and then still be running the ball with Kalen Ballage. I literally can't believe it. If the Chargers aren't top 5, top 10 in neutral pass rate this week against this defense, I don't know what you can do with them. I literally have no idea.
Remember, before this one, before the bye, the Jets' offense was humming along. 6th in play action, 9th in pre-snap motion, put up 27 points against the Patriots defense. I like the over.
The Patriots defense sucks.
Well, so does the Chargers.
The Chargers, a lot of Patriots defense slander the past week. They're going to come together like they always do, folks.
All right,
folks, of course. The past 6 games for the Chargers have allowed 31.6 points per game. They haven't been good. And the Chargers, wrong game plan last week, but they still got there over their team total with 29 points. So I like the over in this game a lot. Denzel Mims still, since he's returned, routes on 100% of Joe Flacco and or Sam Darnold's dropbacks. Jamison Crowder ran the 3rd fewest routes for this team, but was injured, remember, before the bye. We expect him to be healthy and dominate target share again. And then, of course, Flacco prefers his boundary wideouts. That's what Brashad Perryman is, and spiking 2 touchdowns and 100 yards before the bye. I think it's a susceptible defense. That's why I like both sides of the ball.
We're having fun today. This is good. All right, let's go to the Green Bay Packers and the Indianapolis Colts. Colts at home. 2-point favorites, 51.5 total in this game. Pat, we've been searching for a second pass catcher to emerge that's attached to Aaron Rodgers, and we've gotten it over the last 2 weeks with Marquez, Valdez, Scantling, 38 points combined in those 2 contests. But with Allen Lazard returning, most likely, should we have our attention shift? And I also saw right before we hopped on here, Davante Adams was a limited participant at best on Thursday's show. So what I just said might not even matter.
Yeah, it looked like a Thursday downgrade for Davante Adams. He could still get a limited tag maybe on the official injury report. But yeah, it might not be either or between Allen Lazard, who is going to be back. I believe he hasn't played since week 3, just an eternity. And Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who, let's not forget, in this Thursday night game against the 49ers, I was one of these people. People were tweeting about Marquez Valdez-Scantling might be getting cut finally because he had, a horrifying drop where Aaron Rodgers gave him the death stare. And then since then he scored 3 70-yard touchdowns. It's a very tough match. The Colts tough against everything. They've been limiting production from every fantasy position. And without Davante Adams there, if Davante Adams does not play, that could maybe almost hurt Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I feel because Marquez Valdez-Scantling is not going to be someone who's going to be exactly thriving with increased defensive attention, I feel like. And this is a very strange outlook in general for the Packers pass catchers, even if Davante Adams plays, because the production's up, but the targets and the usage really isn't. Allen Lazard, I mean, despite like the sense that he was coming on, it wasn't like he was like exploding. It wasn't like the usage was like totally incredible. It was definitely trending in the right direction. And then guys, like uncertain target totals each week for Aaron Jones, for Robert Tonyan, and basically an offense that I still feel like I don't quite know how this shakes out behind Davante Adams.
Valdez-Scantling had the big day last week, but his usage didn't change whatsoever. He just spiked on his 2 to 3 deep shots he has every single week. And we've seen that Aaron Rodgers has not fallen flat on his face once this year, except against the Bucs. Other than that, even the past month of the year, 300 yards and or multiple touchdowns in every single game. And I don't think the Colts defense has been tested just yet. I believe they're good. They have a good zone structure, but tested, the quarterbacks they faced are Gardner Minshew, Kirk Cousins, Sam Darnold, Nick Foles, Baker Mayfield, allowed 300 yards to Joe Burrow, allowed 303 touchdowns to Stafford, and then, of course, Lamar and Tannehill and floundering offenses the past 2 games. So I do like Aaron Rodgers as a top 6 option this week to bounce back again in this spot.
I will say that the Packers were projected for like the most points over like the last couple of weeks, or at least top 3. This week, Vegas has them projected for the 16th most points. I'm not sure if that includes Davante Adams' downgrade, and now suddenly looks like he's going to be questionable at least. But yeah, I think the ceiling might be a little more capped than usual, just because the Colts kind of play slow and kind of limit deep passes. But I mean, what are you going to do? Aaron Rodgers has been balling out.
Yeah, MVS and Allen Lazard had the same number of targets in those first 3 weeks of the season, 17. And on those, I believe Allen Lazard had 90 more yards, an extra touchdown on that same volume. I mean, MVS's catch rate is like at 50% this entire year. But it doesn't matter. Once again, if Davante Adams is out, then you probably play both of them. Dave, we haven't talked at all about the Colts offense. We've seen the Packers defensively not have Jair Alexander, at least last week. Does that mean Michael Pittman factors in a little bit here? And obviously that backfield with Nyheim Hines had one of his vintage, spiked weeks. Is that something that we can, translate moving forward?
I'll leave Pittman to Pat to see where he has him ranked, because I think he is a really good play this week, even if Jair Alexander plays. But for the backfield, the answer is not only do we not know, but the Colts don't know every single game. You go back 3 games, it was Jordan Wilkins who came in off the bench because Jonathan Taylor was given 6 touches and he got 13 yards. He was clearly ineffective. 2 games ago, of course, Jonathan Taylor fumbled, and then they only ran the ball in negative game script 6 times in the second half. So again, it wasn't Jonathan Taylor's game script. And this past week, we saw Nyheim Hines 7 touches for 57 yards on the first 3 drives for the Colts. Thus, he won the role. And that's what it is every single week. You win the first 2 drives, you win the role. And again, we don't know, the Colts don't know who it is. You can start any or all of them, but you have to expect to either have an RB2 or an egg in your lineup every single week. So it's just a matter of what's the risk you want, what's the price you're willing to play if you have a 0 in your lineup.
Yeah, I have this amazing method of ranking Colts running backs. It's called recency bias. And it's what I do every single week, basically, with the Colts, where I feel like I'm just truly flying blind. I will say the guy offering the most consistent playmaking ability all year has been Nyheim Hines. Maybe he should have been higher to begin with, but he is who I have the highest this week. And for Michael Pittman, I mean, that game he had last week against the Titans, that was by far the best game by any Colts wide receiver all year. And someone we were really excited about coming into the year, someone who seemed like a good fit with Phillip Rivers' skill set, and this injuries conspired against it happening. But I don't think any of us are probably that surprised that Michael Pittman looks like a player who might be coming on. And I tried to be somewhat aggressive. Even with Jair Alexander's practicing on a limited basis, it appears he'll be back. But I've got Pittman basically right on the wide receiver 3-4 borderline, like wide receiver 36, 37. And maybe he's too much of a head. I mean, the guy, he was percolating already before last week. Then he had the 100-yard game. But yeah, just like I'm getting him in the mix basically and hoping for more going forward.
All right, go ahead, Hayden.
Michael Pittman went to a very good academic and athletic university. He has wide receiver 24 fantasy usage over the last month since returning. Ran a route on 38 of 40 dropbacks last week. I think his wide receiver 3 status is here to stay. You kind of ride or die with Phillip Rivers, who's very inconsistent. But I think looking back, he'll probably end up as like a wide receiver 3 on a per game basis in the second half of the season when you want to be betting on rookies, especially rookie wide receivers.
The football guy kind of coach would put Jair Alexander on T.Y. Hilton. The smarter coach would put Alexander on Pittman, knowing he's the better player. So I am curious what happens with LaFleur. I do give LaFleur credit. I do think Alexander will go on Pittman, knowing he's the better receiver, but we were going to find out on Sunday.
Yeah, we'll see what Mike Betten does in that system. All right. Now we go to the Dallas Cowboys going to the Minnesota Vikings. Vikings 7-point favorites in this game, a total of 48.5. Hayden, with how Dalvin Cook is playing right now, Justin Jefferson, etc., I don't see how the Cowboys can slow down this offense. So I feel like you easily start every single Vikings in your lineup. Meanwhile, I believe we get Andy Dalton back, throwing to Amari Cooper, throwing to CeeDee Lamb,
Everyone.
Michael Gallup. I feel like we haven't
Mike
talked about the
Irvin.
Cowboys in like weeks and weeks and weeks.
Miles Austin.
Anyways, that's a good callback. Do we trust Andy Dalton enough, Hayden, to dish it to these wide receivers? So one, the total goes over, and two, to take advantage of this Vikings team that has been hit or miss defensively this season.
I do like the over. When I was doing my blueprint column, I was kind of surprised to see the Cowboys 26 in projected points by Vegas. I think I like the over there. I think I have more faith in Andy Dalton than everyone else. Not that that's like incredible, and I know that seems risky to say, but I mean, these receivers are awesome, and the Vikings can't rush the passer, and their entire cornerback depth chart is still like on the COVID list or on the injured reserve or just not playing well, even when they are fully healthy. So I think that with the Vikings 29th against fantasy receivers, I think that Amari Cooper kind of reemerges as like a wide receiver 3. I think CeeDee Lamb is like a flex option with some sort of a ceiling. And then Michael Gallup still in this like boom bust role as like a desperate wide receiver 4 place. But I think that the second half of the season, you can be slightly more optimistic with the Cowboys with Andy Dalton under center. I think that he's a noticeable upgrade over the Garrett Gilberts and the Ben DiNucci's of the world.
We've only seen Dalton for 98 dropbacks this year, and in those 98 dropbacks, he targeted Amari Cooper for a team-high 19 targets. So that's why I ranked him higher. It's a terrific spot against the Vikings secondary. But again, without Dak Prescott, this offense has been absolutely miserable and averaging 13 points per game. I saw this total, the Vikings with the 4th highest implied team total on the week, and thought like, this makes sense to be over, right? Like if it were the old Cowboys. But how can you just blindly trust them after a full month of doing absolutely nothing? That's what makes it so tough for all these guys.
If only they were Kalen Ballage.
If only. Tried and true.
The problem, for the over and for the Vikings receivers is they could just run over the Dallas Cowboys, obviously, and dominate time of possession and have 250 rushing yards. But yeah, I will agree. So first, Andy Dalton, you typically prefer for your quarterback not to be returning both from a concussion and the novel coronavirus.
Right.
It is a bit of a problem, but Andy Dalton known for a lot of things. And one thing he was not known for in Cincinnati was like wasting the talent around him. Even if the overall scene was always very frustrating, Andy Dalton, he's someone in fantasy. He got their guys their numbers at least, and the volume's going to have to be there, like in spades going down the stretch. And I think we're going to see a stabilization from Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb. Much tougher for Michael Gallup, and it'll be much more like kind of like sporadic for Dalton Schultz. But famous last words from all of us. But yeah, I do think Andy Dalton will stabilize this offense down the stretch.
All right.
Where do you have Zeke ranked? I was kind of struggling with him. I think he's like a RB2. I'm not going to go any lower than that. I will start him over the Rex Burkhead line, like Daigle mentioned earlier, but I can't go back to the RB1 well, at least until we see Andy Dalton actually stabilize this offense.
Yeah, I have him over the Burkhead line. I have him, I believe, RB17, maybe RB18. That's fair. It's just tough. I mean, the usage has not gone anywhere really. I mean, kind of, but like the production is non-existent. And just hasn't looked like the same guy. I mean, looks like weary this year.
He's fat again.
Hey.
We're just judging everyone on this podcast this week. For Jefferson and Thielen, we saw pretty much the culmination of their usage this past week against the Bears. Thielen continues living off touchdowns because since Jefferson got inserted to the lineup as the starting boundary receiver in 2 wide sets in week 3, he has 1 end zone target and 1 red zone target to Thielen's 11 and 10. And that's how they're being used. Jefferson leads the league in yards per route run. He's been the better receiver, getting the better cornerback in every matchup, and Thielen's living off touchdown production. So still both good plays in what should be a high scoring affair. You need Cowboys to keep their side of the ball, though, and actually score points if these guys are going to erupt as top 24 receivers.
I have a feeling we're going to get 40 questions on this game on Rotoworld Live on Sunday morning. So I hope
Thielen or
all
Jefferson?
of you, I hope all of you, or just Ezekiel Elliott, so on and so forth, these wide receivers. So again, join us for Rotoworld Live. That's at noon Eastern on Sunday. 2 more games, primetime games. Let's go to the Kansas City Chiefs, hoping to get their revenge against the Las Vegas Raiders. The Chiefs, despite losing earlier this season to these Raiders, are 8-point favorites on the road, a big boy total of 56.5 in this game. Pat, Sammy Watkins is back. Mecole Hardman might be out, at least what we saw on Thursday. In the games that he's basically played, at least earlier in the season, Watkins was 80+%. Saw that in terms of snaps in 2 of the 3 games played earlier this year. What do you think about this Chiefs offense, which last time they played the Raiders, they certainly were not at their best?
No, by the way, it's stunning to hear the phrase primetime game not followed up by the words Chicago Bears.
Yes.
So that is a very, very nice welcome.
Thank you.
And, we got the narrative of the week this week. I mean, the bus driver screwed up, guys. The Raiders bus driver just really screwed up when he took a victory lap around Arrowhead Stadium in week 6. And the Chiefs, are being weirdly vocal about this and seem very, very upset about losing to the Raiders and the subsequent victory lap. And really bad timing for the Raiders, because going into the Chiefs week 10 bye, they were just like, we have Patrick Mahomes. We are not going to run the ball anymore. And just in 2 back-to-back smash spots, just didn't run the ball, let Pat Mahomes go absolutely wild. And Andy Reid, talk about another one of the oldest narratives we have in the book is Andy Reid after a bye. And Andy Reid angry after a bye against a bad defense, just a passing attack that's just been absolutely cooking. I think we could see the Chiefs just blow the Raiders out of the water this week.
And the Raiders defense, who's even playing for them? 8 starters on the COVID list, plus some personnel behind the scenes. We don't even know who's going to be available for this game. So it's just the Chiefs in a landslide right now.
You're going to see Coach Andy Reid ghost ride the whip in the Vegas parking lot, just go absolutely nuts. Patrick Mahomes in his 5 games against the Raiders, 32, 40, 28, 35, and 40 points as a team. Get him in the lineup. Get Sammy Watkins in the lineup against these backup corners. Eruption spot coming.
Yeah, he's going to be like the Kool-Aid man out there. I went back and watched actually that game in week 5 just for the show. The Chiefs were up 14-3 at one point, then 21-10. And then Derek Carr started beating them down the field. You had Nelson Aguilar's revival started that week. You had 20-plus yard plays by their fullback, by Devontae Booker. Even Henry Ruggs had a deep touchdown. And I think most importantly, Daigle, the Chiefs scored just 8 points in that second half in that game. Do we think that's possible again? Absolutely not. No. I'm with everyone here, and maybe this is too much groupthink, but I don't see how this game, 8 points is a lot, but I just don't see how Vegas wins this one.
And imagine if you got it at 7 before they took it off the board. You're living pretty right now. Besides the point, though, everyone has been asking about this backfield and this offense for the Raiders. And the fact is, we don't know. Nelson Aguilar is still being used as the number 2 receiver. Henry Ruggs is technically the wide receiver, but Aguilar continues living off touchdowns if he doesn't drop them, and Ruggs continues not being used at all, whereas it's Darren Waller getting peppered with the highest target share on the team every single week, and that's the one guy they'll go to. I worry about Josh Jacobs in this matchup because I think they'll have to put their foot on the gas and lean on Derek Carr. So perhaps he does have a higher ceiling than most weeks, although we haven't seen that the past 3 games where he's been under 30 attempts in both of them, including the 1 win game for Cleveland. And then also Devontae Booker. I know 17 touches the past week, but do not be fooled. Do not start him. 4 touches in the first half, 9 of those 17 in the fourth quarter when they are up 20-6, when the Broncos had already thrown in the towel, and it was very obvious they weren't even trying in the second half.
Pat, I know you sometimes monitor the news as we were doing this show. I believe right before I came on this show, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, after warm-ups, went into the building and did not return. Is there anything new on that right now?
Our friend Craig Dennis Carter messaged me about that before the podcast, but I have not seen anything more on that. But so unfortunately, you're not getting breaking news during this day-old podcast right now.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
I was going to say Edwards-Helaire, 8 and 9 touches the past 2 games, a disaster since Le'Veon Bell joined the team, but this would be the matchup for him. And then, of course, Le'Veon Bell isn't even really startable if Edwards-Helaire plays, but if not, that's, of course, the player you're going to.
All right. We will move on to close out this slate.
The Chicago Bears at the Chicago Bears.
The Los Angeles Rams against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Bucks at home, 4-point favorites here, a total of 48.5. Hayden, the Bucks have an outstanding defense. They have outstanding blitzing linebackers and safeties. They can create pressure in a lot of different ways. And the Rams are without the anchor of their offensive line and left tackle Andrew Whitworth, and it'll be the first time for the next seemingly 6 or 8 weeks, if not more. So how is that going to go for Jared Goff?
Poorly, and it's the best blitzing defensive coordinator in the league too. And if the Bucks offense clicks as we've seen it, it's been kind of inconsistent. But if the Bucks come out and jump out to like a 14-point lead, a 10-point lead early, Jared Goff's going to have his back against the wall. I do think you're going to see a lot of pass attempts. So I think that Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods are definitely plays, even if we kind of expect the efficiency to be kind of a struggle for Jared Goff. The question becomes, are you going to start any of the Rams running backs, because their snap counts, their touch share, all of that was basically dead even last week. And we're kind of seeing more reports kind of sprinkling in that Cam Akers is going to be kind of mirroring Darrell Henderson on early downs. Malcolm Brown still sprinkling in around the goal line. What do you do with the backfield? Diggle, do you have any thoughts?
Well, Cam Akers got Sony Michel, Damian Harris usage. Like, that was it. 10 carries and no targets, basically not even running routes for that team. So I don't think he's the player you want. I mean, the entire Rams offense, that's what's funny, is question marks, because remember, Darrell Henderson went into the bye with that quad injury, came out as limited, and then was removed from the injury report. So maybe they scaled him back. Or was that the game plan all along to get Cam Akers involved starting after the bye? Also, Cooper Kupp, the third fewest routes on the team. Was it that because he was limited throughout the week in practice, or because Josh Reynolds, who leads the team in end zone targets the past month, has usurped him? And so that's the question mark here. The thing is, with Reynolds and Woods and Kupp and these guys, like, Reynolds has become a terrific play for 10-team leagues, but this is a bad matchup. So where do you even rank him, Pat? Where do you rank the other two as well in this, like I said, horrific game?
Well, it is weird because Hayden, so it's a horrible matchup, as we know, and especially Jared Goff, under pressure, missing
without Whitworth
tackle against this defense is just like 5 alarms going off. But it stands to reason there's going to be a ton of volume. I struggled with all of these rankings. Jared Goff, I have beyond QB 20 right now, which I felt a pang of panic when I felt Hayden talking about. I was like, man, that is really low for Jared Goff this week. But such a disappointing game, and like the smash matchup last week for Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods. But I still, even with Josh Reynolds coming on, I'm kind of keeping Cooper Kupp and Bob Woods in that low end wide receiver too. But at running back, I did not know what to do. I mean, it's almost like as bad as the Ravens situation at this point, where Darrell Henderson just like blows up the eye test every time he plays. He's Pro Football Focus's #1 rated runner right now. I don't understand why this is the plan right now, to like full on 3-man committee this out of nowhere, but I just had no idea. I ranked Darrell Henderson the highest because I just think he's the best player. And it's not like he like faded off the earth last week, but it's just such a frustrating situation where I feel like we're basically guessing at running back.
McVay basically warned us that this was going to happen prior to the season. I mean, he was talking about Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers and how they use their backs, and this is exactly that, right? So I agree with you. But haven't we seen, and forgive me if someone already said this, but if we are expecting negative game script for the Rams, and we have seen them when they go down by 10 plus points in previous years, they just completely abandon the run and just throw the ball. In that case, I mean, we haven't really seen Darrell Henderson be used in the passing game, right? It's mostly Malcolm Brown in those situations. So that'll be one to watch. Anything on the Bucs? I mean, Ronald Jones had just the best game of his career there in week 10. The Rams, we saw Jalen Ramsey completely lock down DK Metcalf. He will certainly be able to do that against Mike Evans if they decide to put him there, or if they, move him to the slot against Chris Godwin, or if they put him on Antonio Brown, who knows in that direction. But Diego, anything to say about this Bucs offense?
The receivers played just like the week before, where in routes run, where it's Evans, Godwin, and Antonio Brown. It's like light Steelers wide receiver usage, where all three are in play every single week. And I expect it to be volatile who leads the others weekly, but it was still very good to see Brown and Godwin involved, yet Mike Evans still stand the test of time with a team high in target share, 11 targets, and also 3 end zone targets.
And I'll say both Rams cornerbacks are good. So it's not just Jalen Ramsey. I know I keep talking about Jalen Ramsey and everyone does, but both of them are playing at an extremely high level right now.
Yeah, he's the best corner in the NFL, in my opinion. When I looked at the Bucs offense, when they get to the red zone, you kind of see some weird usage where Antonio Brown is either off the field or like furthest away from Tom Brady, and they're like really trying to get the ball to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, who are in the 2 tight end sets when they ever do go down there. So I think Antonio Brown's going to need some big plays to kind of pay off. But like we've been saying, I do wonder if Jalen Ramsey goes to Mike Evans, that's my best bet, if that opens things up for Antonio Brown. And if this game's competitive, you're going to see Tom Brady and the Bucs pass a lot because they're still top 5 in neutral pass rate. So I think that you want to be starting all of these guys. That still includes Gronk, whose usage is down, but still good enough, especially in the red zone, to start basically all of these guys.
We've seen, like, even against Marshawn Lattimore, though, like, Brady doesn't care about the cornerback matchup. He's throwing a fade to Evans when they get inside the 10-yard line. So that makes him, of course, volatile, but pretty safe still.
Yeah, Brady, I would say, despite the numbers and the scoreboard indicating it, he had a up and down week last week against the Panthers. If he's a self-scouter, self-evaluator, and is in a get-right spot here in terms of, wanting to prove that he's not the weakest link on this Bucs offense, then I could see the Bucs, putting up 35 points in this game.
And then one closing thought. Rob Gronkowski is the line for Taysom Hill as a tight end on ESPN leagues. Start your top 5 tight ends, and then Taysom Hill for me is the tight end 6 overall, wherever applicable.
All right. That's going to do it for us on the show. Again, be sure to join Hayden and Daigle on Friday. Pat, they are evening, right, for building blocks, and you are afternoon for your Q&A show on your rankings, correct?
I feel like you should mention my show first since it's earlier.
I apologize.
At 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m.
Edit the
Central.
podcast to let Pat be first.
Yeah, check all of us out on Friday. We have a lot of content out there.
Yep.
All 3 of us.
Speaking of content, we'll be back on Sunday morning /noon for Rotoworld Live, served by Applebee's. Be sure to join us on Twitch, on YouTube, on Periscope, all of that good stuff. And again, we'll be back Monday morning with a game-by-game recap show covering every single fantasy-relevant player out there, and then normal waivers on Tuesday mornings, then another show Wednesday, and then another one on Thursday. All right, that's going to do it for us. For Daigle, for Pat, for Hayden, I am Josh up the Villa. Talk to you all soon. See ya.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.